There we go. Tonight's topic, when love hurts, is a sensitive topic. And as I was preparing more and more for this class, I realized that I want to stay away, actually, from the actual discussion of the topic. I'll tell you why. Because it's a very sensitive one. We speak about pain, suffering, loss. It's a very dangerous path to tread, discussing it in the abstract. As a philosophical, theological question, you end up being very cold and removed, and which is okay on a certain level, but it doesn't deal with the actual emotional, the pain people are dealing with. And when it comes across, is the people who are dealing with that pain, who have experienced it, get hurt because you're brushing away their hurt, their pain. So it's a topic which has to be treated very carefully, obviously, and in a discussion to someone who's going through it, it's obviously a very different discussion to a class in the abstract. So I want to be very clear that tonight's discussion is not about how to deal with pain and suffering and loss. It's an abstract discussion. It's more of a theological discussion. It's a way to frame our lives, frame the way we view bad things that happen, but it's not in any way, shape, or form meant to be a practical response or a hands-on approach if someone is going through pain or suffering or loss. And I'm going to go a little bit to the side instead of dealing directly with pain, loss, and suffering because of the sensitivities involved. We're going to shift a little and speak more about the theological implications of evil, of things that happen bad and wrong in this world. And more specifically, how God can commit these acts. Now, for the non-believer, there are no questions. There are no answers. And for the believer, there are no questions. So, someone who has total, complete faith in God, everything is good, God is good, my life is good, and I'm shutting off any emotional, even theological questions. I'm just turning them off. God is great. And I live in this oblivion, in this trance of just divine meditation. That's one extreme. The other extreme is the atheist. There is no God. And so, what questions can I have? What answers can I have? Nothing. I can't say, why does this happen? There is no why. There's no conductor behind this orchestra. There's no symphony. Life happens. The world came into being by accident. There is no trajectory, no purpose. Things just evolve and happen. And if something terrible happened to enter this evolution, if something tragic got into the mix, okay? Tragedy in itself is a misnomer. There is no tragedy. There is no evil, bad. There just is. Now, it may seem bad to me in my little personal life, but I can't complain. There's nothing to complain about, no one to complain to. So there is nothing to discuss. So if you are on either end of this spectrum, we can pack up our books, we can go home. Right? But for the rest of us, we're somewhere in the middle. We have faith in God. We do believe there should be some sort of order. There should be some sort of moral right in the world. And when that isn't lived up to, we feel hurt, pained, we feel cheated, we feel it's wrong. And we also believe that God is the master of good. God is infinite, can do anything, and is absolute goodness. And therefore, would not sadistically just try to cause pain and suffering on his creations. And when we put those two together, we come into a big problem. If God is orchestrating things, if there is a master, a creator to this universe, and that creator is good, then injustice, then evil really has no place. And it hits us like a ton of bricks. How could this be? Why is this happening? We shout out in dismay, in disgust, in surprise. How can this be? And that's the reaction most of us have when we personally experience something bad, when we hear about something terrible in the world. And this could be something as small as a stubbed toe. Right? It's like, oh, why did that have to happen? Why did it have to happen? What sort of question is that? That question only is a question if you believe that they have to, there's a supposed to. You believe that there's someone, there's something which is causing things to go a certain way. And that someone, something, wants it to go in a very safe way, in a happy way, in a calm way, in a good way. Then your question is, why did this happen? But if any of those two factors are missing, there's no question of why and no question of happening. Right? So now that we've established the principles, let's get into the main meat and potato of the question. Besides the ongoing tragedies that happen in the world and pain that we experience in our own lives that we can ask these questions about, we're faced with this question in a very strong way from this week's Torah reading. Referred to as the curses or the punishments. And if you read this week's portion, you have a list. If you don't follow the mitzvahs, I will do this, I will do that. Terrible. Like really creative, sadistic curses. God is warning us about hunger but it doesn't just say you'll be hungry. 10 women will bake bread in one oven and you will eat, won't be satisfied, and your enemies will take your things. Like it really goes on and it's striking. And I'll tell you what, I'm learning now with Bar Mitzvah Boy, the Parsha is the next one that speaks about these curses, Kisavo. And it's a hard Parsha to speak over the 13-year-old boy, 12-year-old boy. It's like, this is the God who we worship. This is the God who we speak about and we proclaim that, we're so lucky with God. We are the chosen people. This is the God? So how do we make sense of this? What sort of God does this? And besides the theological question, it's a very practical question. God gave us the Torah as a way of life. It's a religious doctrine. It's a blueprint for a higher living. That through observing the mitzvahs, through living a Torah life, we're going to experience a greater reality. We'll make the world into a better place. Our lives will be more holy. Our lives will be more in sync with the Creator, more in sync with ourselves. God's giving us a real blueprint for higher living. Now, that only makes sense is if we live by these values, right? If I take Shabbos, for example, so it's meant to instill within a person the belief in a Creator, in a higher order, that we are not in control of the world. It's a belief that some things, we lead up to God. If I observe Shabbos without any of its background, if I just have the behavior without the spirit, without the motivation, yes, I've kept the mitzvah. But has God sort of achieved his intended results? No. Shabbos has become a performance and not an uplifting and enriching mitzvah. So if God tells us, you better do these mitzvahs, or else I will strike you down, that sort of relegates the whole entire Torah to a fear-mongering set of rules. God says, you better do this. Does he want us to keep Torah out of fear of punishment, out of fear of our lives? Is that the way we're meant to approach Judaism? That I'm afraid to veer off the straight and narrow path, lest a bolt of lightning strike me down? So, what would be the point of all these curses? Why are they here? And why is this tactic one that God uses in Torah? So that's the questions we want to explore today. And I want to take a 3-step process in exploring these 3 figures in history. They're going to help us understand, from one perspective at least. Tonight we're going to look at a Hasidic perspective. There are many ideas as to where reward and punishment fit into the Jewish scheme of things and how they work. I want to take one idea tonight. And it's not going to explain the whole reward and punishment thing. That's beyond. Just this element of these curses, these punishments, and which can extend to the overarching idea of evil in the world and of pain and suffering in the world. These 3 figures we're going to look at today is Isaiah, the prophet Yeshaya. The second one is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we spoke about last week. And the third one is going to be the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the third Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel. Incidences with each 3 are going to lead us down this path of understanding. We're going to start with Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon one time sent his son, Rabbi Eliezer, to Rabbi Shimon's contemporaries, some rabbis, to get a blessing. His young son, go to these rabbis to be blessed. And the Talmud records the story in Moed Katan 9a. The Talmud says that the 2 rabbis were Rabbi Yonasan, the son of Amsi, and Rabbi Yehud, the son of Gerim. So Elazar goes to these people obediently and follows his father and goes to these rabbis, and they, instead of blessing him, they give him what sounds like curses. They curse him. And this young boy goes back to his father and says, you sent me to these people for blessings. They curse me. And Rabbi Shimon knew his friends. They wouldn't curse his son. And so he understood there must be something deeper. He says, what are the curses they told you? And his son went on to tell him the words they said. And Rabbi Shimon said, oh, you have to look a little deeper. And he explained their words to be alluding to very deep blessings. So because he knew his friends very well, he knew they were playing some sort of game. They wouldn't curse his son. And he understood this depth of what they're saying, and they're really saying blessings. That's the story in the Talmud. Let's go to figure number 2, Isaiah. Isaiah was a very colorful prophet, and he foretold about the redemption, very prophet of hope for the Jewish people, but also at the time chastised the Jewish people, rebuked them, told them off in the name of God. And there's one particular instance in Isaiah where, in Perek Gimel, chapter 3, he foretells them, he tells the Jews about 18 curses, 18 terrible things that are going to happen to them because they're not following what God wants. And the Talmud quotes a rabbi, Rav Dimi, who says something very strange. And this is in Chagiga. I have the sources here, I don't have a source sheet, but in Chagiga, Rav Dimi says the following. He says that Isaiah was not happy, wasn't placated with these 18 until he prophesies one final curse. In his final curse, he says, they will demean the youngster over the elder, over the base, and the base over the respectable. Meaning the youngers will disrespect the elders, the simpletons will disrespect the rabbis. And he says, after this, finally he was happy. And I came across this passage in Talmud, I was so surprised. It's as if like Isaiah was looking to get at the Jews, his people, mind you, right? His community. And the 18 punishments, 18 curses just didn't do it. Oh, finally, God told me this 19th one, I got it. This is a good one. Gave him the zets. Finally, Isaiah is happy. Finally, Isaiah is happy. Is that the prophet Isaiah? Is he this, wanting doom and destruction for the Jewish people? Is that who he is? So the Maharsha is a 16th century commentary on the Talmud. You find in the back of every book of Talmud. Fantastic commentary. And he has, part of his commentary is classic explanations, and part of it is, deeper interpretations into the stories. Always very beautiful. And he has here a fantastic explanation. He says, let's look at this final curse. The final curse, he's cursing the Jews that the young will disrespect the old. He says, we have a similar parallel passage in the Talmud. And this is in a different tractate. The Talmud says, right before the redemption, sort of the last stage of exile of this dark world, will be when the chutzpah, when the young will have audacity, disrespect, give no honor to the elders. So the Maharsha says, now I understand Isaiah. Isaiah didn't want bad for the Jews. He wanted that good. He was their leader. He was their advocate. He was God's spokesperson in the Jewish community. When Isaiah had this vision, was told this final curse, he was very happy. He says, oh, this means there's hope. I know that this is the final hurdle until the redemption. Once there is this youngsters disrespecting the elders, that means we're about to herald in an era of hope, of light, of goodness. And so when he heard that curse, or when he said it, he then was filled with hope. So if we think about what this means, Isaiah wasn't just happy with this one curse. I think he understood now a whole different perspective of all the curses that he was giving. In this one, he understood it. He got it, right? When you hear these stories of someone missed the bus and that bus got into an accident. Or, there's all these stories of 9/11 where people were running late to work and couldn't get there in time. And we all have, our own stories which in our own lives we've experienced when something in a moment seemed terrible, bad, stressful, and either right afterwards, months later, maybe years later, we realize, wow, how amazing it happened to me. Right? At the time, I couldn't see where that would lead me or how that's good, but now I realize that was the best thing that happened to me in my life. We all have those stories. And this was sort of what Isaiah went through. He said, this curse sounds terrible, disruption of the community. But he realized, one second, in the larger picture of history, this is, a good thing. It means we're on something special. It means that's the stage, the lowest the Jews will go until they step back up and rise up to become a strong nation again. So essentially, what Isaiah realized was that when God cursed the Jewish people, it's never really for the sake of the curse. We may not always understand it. And for the 18 curses he said first, he didn't understand it. And it probably pained him to no end. Right? But, essentially, we have to realize and believe sometimes, just in blind faith, that God doesn't want our bad, doesn't want our harm, and there's always something positive, something good that God wants out of this. Now, if we pause for a second here and think about it, what the implications of this, it can be a dangerous path to go down, and I started the class with this disclaimer, right? It can be easy to say, you know what? Anything bad that happens in the world, anytime someone is suffering, it's what God wants. It's for the good. Now, don't try this at home, right? Don't, someone comes over to you and tells you how bad their day is. Don't worry, it's for the good. It's for the good. Someone says, I suffered a terrible tragedy in my family. I say, it's for the good. Don't worry, God is all good. You're not going to get very far, right? And not only will you get very far, that's terrible, right? You're insensitive. Not only insensitive, you're wrong. And the Baal Shem Tov has a fascinating teaching where he says there's one exception to faith in God. Always have faith in God, besides when it concerns someone else. And he differentiates between a tragedy or pain that you suffer and that someone else suffers. never try to rationalize someone else's pain. Never brush it off, say, well, God is good and it must be good what you're going through. That is bad, right? That is not only insensitive, it's immoral, and it's not a religious belief. Your own pain and suffering, you can accept and say, well, God's giving this to me, it must be good. Or I have to learn from it. So what happens to yourself, then it's something which you have to reflect. And you should reflect. Either reflect, why am I coming to me? Or reflect, how can I learn from it? Or what's the good in it? It must be a silver lining. It's bringing me somewhere deeper. It's a challenge that's going to help me grow. In your own head, your own problems, not only could you do that, you should. But someone else's issues, never. Right? And that's why when I'm speaking in this class and I'm, projecting, I'm speaking ideas, I'm very careful. I don't want to say that things that happen wrong in the world, well, it's for the good because God did it. I can say it to myself. I can think about my own issues that way, but I can't say it to anyone else. And I can't preach it as a doctrine, as something which we want to believe. We want to believe it for ourselves. But, that being said, we do have a principle that Ein Ra Yored Milmaila. Nothing completely evil comes from above. That means nothing that happens in this world is ultimately bad. There's good in everything. The question, though, is, what does good mean? They used to, I don't think they have it anymore. There used to be ads, I think it was HSBC, on all of the ramps to airplanes and the airports. They had these ads contrasting different cultures, where the same thing was good in one culture and bad in another culture. So it had just a picture of something saying good and bad, or same thing was sort of seen differently in different countries. What's good for one person can be bad for another person, and the definition of good is what really has to be translated here. So when we say that everything that happens in the world is good, that there's no real curses in life, everything's a blessing, what does that mean? Doesn't mean to say, well, if someone punches you in the face, you don't feel pain because it's good. No, you felt pain, and you lost your days of work from the hospital visits. You got the bill. That's not good, right? You have that bruise. You're missing teeth. That's not good, right? So, what does it mean if I would say, well, that's for the good? Now, you may discover that because you're missing teeth, you now you can maybe get disabilities, or maybe they're casting for a role in a movie where they're looking for someone missing teeth, right? And you may discover, wow, that was great, but more often than not, you won't, right? There's the story of a king who went hunting with his servant, and I don't remember the story. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to mess it up. I'll leave it for next time. But the point is, sometimes we do see how misfortune that happened to us ends up being for the good, but more often than not, we don't. And we have to redefine good. And this is a real deep discussion that is tremendously important and tremendously sensitive. And tonight we're having a discussion in the abstract. So we're speaking in a concept, an ideal, that's very difficult to live up to. And definitely not something which we should preach in real life. It's something which, to keep in our minds and on our own terms for ourselves, try to live up to, but never keep it as a standard. Something fascinating. The primary work of the founder of Chabad, Rishner Zalman of Liadi, he wrote the Tanya. The Tanya is a magnificent work. It is a Hasidic work based on Kabbalah and spiritual teachings, but it's a map of the soul, a guide to life. And it calls from spiritual teachings and Talmudic teachings and puts together this complete picture of the human being, of Judaism, of the world. It's incredible. When Tanya was printed, they printed, in addition to it, other writings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman. One of those writings is called Igeres HaKodesh, which literally means the holy letters, and it's a collection of letters, most of them public letters, that he wrote. Most of them are to communities on different occasions. Some of them when communities suffered a loss, some just random letters to communities about charity and significance of charity. There's one very famous letter. It's the 11th letter there in this work, which is the addendum to Tanya, and it deals with this issue, and it's a very, very deep, profound, and difficult letter. It's short, to the point, very strong in its wording. But what's fascinating is that whereas all the letters, since they're written to the communities, to the public, are addressed in the plural, right? When they're addressing whoever it's being addressed to. You in the plural, because in Hebrew the word you is different in the singular and the plural as opposed to English. Whereas this letter, although it was also written to a community, is addressed originally in the singular. He writes, "Lahaskil chabina," I want to teach you wisdom in this topic. And Hasidim over the last couple hundred years have discussed this, have analyzed why would this uncharacteristically and grammatically incorrectly be addressed in the singular. And one idea I once heard, I don't know where it comes from, but I think it's very a good idea, something that has merit, is that this particular letter was a subject matter that is very lofty. He's preaching an ideal here which is very challenging, very confronting, very deep. And it's not expected of everyone to just accept this and be able to live this way instinctively and automatically. It's an ideal that we should strive towards, but only, special people, very sensitive, deep, spiritual people can actually live it. And so he wrote in the singular to say it's not for everyone. I'm preaching, I'm telling you, I'm laying down a groundwork, a framework for what an ideal, objective truth. But I don't expect everyone to jump on board with this. And I'm not writing it in a way that you should feel guilty if you're not. So I'm writing in the singular, meaning don't feel it's addressed to everyone. So this concept is something which is an ideal. But what's the concept? There's a story. B'Shneur Zalman, the Alter Rebbe, he was a rabbi in a synagogue. He was also the Baal Koreh, who would read the Torah. And one time, he was away for the weekend. And someone else stepped in to read the Torah, and it happened to be that weekend was the weekend when he read the curses, the punishments. We have it in this week's portion, but it happened to be the next time it's mentioned in the end of in Deuteronomy. That was the weekend when he was away. That Shabbos, his grandson, who was very close with him, because his grandson's mother died, and Rishon sort of brought him up. His grandson fell ill, very sick. Actually, it was his son, I think. I think it was his son, Mithra. One of them fell very ill. And they asked him what happened. He said, I heard these curses today, these punishments, described in the Torah reading, and I was blown away. I was so distraught and disturbed by them. It bothered me so greatly that I became sick. To the point where a few weeks later, it wasn't even clear if he'd be able to fast for Yom Kippur, because he was so sick. And they asked him, you're not a young man. You weren't born yesterday. You hear this reading every single year. It's not the first time you're hearing of these curses God is promising to bring on the Jewish people. Why today? Why were you suddenly so distraught? He said, when my father, or grandfather, I don't remember who it was, but when my father reads the Torah, I don't hear curses. I only hear blessings. Now, it was the same reading, the same texts. I only hear blessings. And in fact, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, in his teachings, takes a few of these verses and explains the spiritual meaning of them to be blessings. I'll tell you, for example, one of them. I mentioned before the curse says 10 women will bake bread in one oven. Basically, such a shortage of food. So he explains that bread is the idea of Torah, and oven, the fire, is passion, the heat, passion we have. 10 women refers to the 10 faculties of the soul. It's the idea that the entire being, my entire persona, will be passionate, will have this fiery excitement for Torah that will resonate in my whole being. That's one example where he takes what seems to be an outsider curse and explains that it's really referring to a very heightened state of service of God. But the text he was reading was the same text, yet his son only heard blessings. So here's one Hasidic idea, one take of what this can mean. If we believe that there's a God in the world, right? I laid down in the beginning of the class 2 foundations. One, there is a God in the world, so a creator and a master and orchestrator of the universe. And B, that God is a moral, good God, right? And because those two come together, we had the question, how can bad things happen? But if we establish those things as a fact, as a faith, the article of faith, that God is ultimate of good and everything that happens in the world is from God, to complain about something is to deny one of those 2 principles, essentially. So let's put it this way. Everything in this world, every expression has to have a form. For example, we use words, speech, to express our ideas. A teacher is teaching something they have in their head, an idea, and teaching it to their students. They need the words to convey the idea. The words themselves aren't the idea, right? Words can be jumbled to mean something else. They're words, they're tools. But those words are tools the teacher uses to convey an idea. The more words a teacher has, so the greater their vocabulary, the better they can explain the idea. Because they have greater tools, sort of a greater container to hold the idea in. When you limit a vocabulary, there's less room in those words, the tool is smaller, and therefore only a smaller idea, the depth of the idea can't get across. Which is why, for example, a lot of philosophy was written in German, which has a really hugely extensive vocabulary with very nuanced words. And it's very hard to translate into English, where we have maybe 5 or 6 German words, one translation, right? So the deeper the more extensive the vocabulary, the deeper idea can express. Because as the form, the tool I'm using is bigger, and therefore more can fit in it, right? The same is true if I want to do you a favor. Okay, what am I going to do good for you? So I have to find something which is going to be appreciated by you. The form it takes, the container, is how I'm expressing my goodness, right? So any expression, therefore, is going to be a limited expression because everything in this world is limited. If I love you, or I am very good friends with you, and I want to express that, I have to tailor it to you. What do you need? What are you going to appreciate? So what ends up happening, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, but what ends up happening is I'm not fully expressing my emotion. Because I have to tailor it to how you're going to appreciate it. And if I'm buying you a gift, it may not even be something I want to buy you. This thing I'm buying is not really expressing how I feel for you. But that's what you want, so I'm going to get it for you. So I have to tailor it and sort of dilute the full expression of my emotion in order for it to be appreciated by you. If I don't dilute my expression, you won't be able to find the right container, the right form that you will appreciate it. Making sense? Let's think of that now in a much broader context of the relationship between us and God. When we ask for good from God, what we're usually asking for, I want something that I appreciate, right? We see the world through our own lenses, through our experience, through our understanding. I want things that make sense to me, that are good in my eyes. And I'm asking God, tailor your goodness. Cater it to my container, to goodness in my form, what I appreciate. That's going to be health. That's going to be maybe financial security. That's going to be relationships. It's going to be happiness, good experiences. Those are the things that I recognize as good. So God, express your goodness in this limited form that I appreciate. Is that the full expression of God's goodness? Absolutely not. It's actually, not only is it, imagine in human relationships, how my gift to you is only a sliver of what I'm really feeling. Put that in the context of the relationship between the infinite God and ourselves. Our understanding of good, our appreciation is minute, is insignificant in the ultimate reality of God's infinitude. And so when we ask God for things that we want, we pray, or we are happy with the good thing God give us, we give God a very limited definition. I want you to really tailor your infinite goodness, and I only want it in this way. What if God wants to give us more of His goodness? Something that is beyond our containers, beyond our appreciation. Now you would say, I don't want it. It's not good. So here comes the big question. What's your ultimate goal? And the same question can be asked in relationships. Is your goal, let's say in relationships with spouses, is my goal the gift? Oh, I get another piece of jewelry that I can wear? Oh, I have something, a new gadget? Or is my goal, what I want out of this gift is, that was a real deep expression of love, of commitment. So imagine someone you love buys you a gift which they handmade. They spend hours and hours making it, and you absolutely think it's disgusting. It's terrible. It looks awful, right? But they invested everything they have. It was personalized. They gave their whole self in this gift. Do you appreciate that gift or not? I want a gift. I want something new for my wardrobe. I want a new gadget in my home. This is not a gift. This is horrendous. Get this out of my face. But if the reason you want a gift from your spouse, from your friend, is that this is an expression of love, of closeness, I don't care what the gift is. This is so meaningful, so precious, right? This is so much invested in it. There's the person, there's you in here. I want this. So I'm left wearing this ugly thing, but you know what? When I wear it, I feel you, right? It's a closeness that's given here. Now, this is obviously just a silly example, but let's move this over. What are we after in life? What are we searching for? And this is a really, really difficult question. And it's a question which has no right or wrong answer, but it's something which we have to ask ourselves and confront ourselves about sometimes. And it's an ongoing question. What do I want in life? What's the ultimate goal? What am I working towards? And so for a lot of people, the base thing will be happiness. I want to be happy. What's going to get me to be happy? We work our whole lives around the subconscious need of happiness. Maybe it's going to be success for different people. But maybe for the religious person, my ultimate goal should be, I want to experience closeness with God. And I'm willing to sacrifice my comforts. I'm willing to sacrifice what I feel is good to me in the moment, what seems good, for a closeness, for an experience with God. So now, if God offers you this goodness that doesn't fit into your definition of goodness, that is too big, too expansive for the very narrow definition of good we have in this world. If I want the good, if I want to have a comfortable life, I want to be happy, I want easy, I want my pleasures, my desires, my fulfillment right now. God, I don't want your infinite goodness. It doesn't fit into my agenda. It's not good for me. But if I want to experience something altogether transcendent, if I want to experience a relationship with God, say, God, yes, give me that goodness. It may not experience itself as goodness in my life, but it's a certain expression of God, a closeness with God that I can't experience anywhere else. It's a deeper reflection of God.
It's interesting. I was just thinking about something in line with the humorous analogy you made before, which was appropriate. Whenever something goes wrong with my car or your car, everything's computerized now. It's way beyond the scope. So I'm totally willing. A mechanic, I'm totally an empty vessel. It's all yours. Anything you say goes. I'm willing to accept it. But in the grand scheme of my life, imagine like divine purpose. Wait, God, no, this is what I need. Like all of a sudden, we're not turn it over just to make an analogy.
Right. So here is the difficult step. I mean, this is also a difficult step. That my goal in life is not my own comforts and goodness, but a closeness to God is a very difficult step, and something which we have to process. But the next difficult step is, if this goodness of God can't be experienced in the goodness of our world, how is it experienced? And the strange thing is, it has to be experienced in something tragic, not good. Because the only way this can come into the world is if it's not attempted to be contained. The infinite goodness can only be expressed in non-goodness. Because anything good is limited how good it is. Right? So whatever God gives you that you appreciate, well, how much did He give you? Right? What am I appreciating? It has its limits. How can an infinite goodness be inserted, be experienced, if it is not in a container of good? And so it comes out as something which we don't experience as good. In other words, we experience it as bad. Imagine a philosophy teacher at an Ivy League college walks into a kindergarten room and gives this beautiful lesson. And the students are like, I don't understand a word, right? They didn't get what. It's not even like, even the language, the words they never heard of before. Now, what went on over here? This was the most, people would pay to come here, right? There'd be, people pay tens of thousands of dollars just to hear lessons like this. And these kids don't appreciate it at all. Was the teacher giving a good lesson or not a good lesson? So it depends. If I'm that preschool kid and I want to understand, terrible lesson. But essentially what was being given to them was gold. It was pearls of wisdom. Now, the reason an analogy isn't a good analogy because those pearls of wisdom are worthless to them if they don't understand it. Right? But imagine it'd be something which they're getting even though they don't comprehend. They're actually getting that result. So imagine somehow the information the professor was saying was going into their brains without them being able to process it. Then I'd say, although they had to sit through and suffer through this lecture, and they didn't enjoy it at all, they walked out with incredible information, right? And so it seemed to them as torture sitting through this lecture, but it was actually incredible. So that's the sort of thing. We see this world, sometimes we have things that are bad in this world. We have pain, we have suffering, we experience things that we don't make any sense of. But maybe that's God speaking His deep thoughts to us. Maybe that's a deeper, more expansive, infinite expression of God that comes out as chaos in this world. Something which can't be tempered by any definition of good, by any channel of good. And so, again, this is only for ourselves to think of in our own minds. But here's something to think of, and it's not going to, it's not something you can just apply tomorrow. It takes a lot of training and thought and meditation to really come to terms with this and accept this, and not just in a, doing lip service, to actually see the world this way. It's almost non-human, right? We're not built this way. But
It takes experience.
experience,
I mean,
but also like a real steep, strong faith, and that faith becomes the most important thing to you. But when you suffer something tragic, or you experience pain, you reframe it in your mind saying, wow, this is an incredibly deep expression of God that I can't appreciate. I'm not saying you should appreciate it. Don't appreciate it. It's pain. Call it as it is. It's suffering. It's bad in our reality. Don't say, God did it, it's good. That's why I'm reframing the word good. Good doesn't mean that I'm happy with it. It's still terrible in this world. I should not try to rationalize it. It's something bad that happened. We mourn death. We have to combat evil. We have to confront pain. But also be aware that perhaps it's an opportunity for a deeper experience of God. It's God opening himself up to me more than I can appreciate.
I mean,
And somehow
right.
my relationship to God can be awakened here in a way that wasn't accessible before. Let me just finish off. This perspective is deep and profound, and something which can blow you away. Also very difficult and sensitive. I said before, and I'll say it again because I can't say it enough. It's not something to tell other people that are going through pain and suffering, and tell them it's just God giving you a big hug and smothering you in love. Yeah, don't say that. But what this does is for yourself, it reframes the question. You know, there's the famous question, why did bad things happen to good people? And there's two ways we can ask the question. One is a rhetorical question, and it's almost a complaint. Why do bad things happen to good people? It doesn't belong. It shouldn't be that way. And one is, why do bad things happen to good people? You know, it's an attempt to understand it. It's questioning it. It's a good question. Let me try to figure this out. Why do bad things happen to good people? And that's the difference in how we should ask the question of ourselves and how we should ask the question of others. When something bad happens to someone else, someone suffers a tragedy, pain, loss, our reactions be, what? God? Is that fair? That shouldn't be. We have to protest. Why do bad things happen to good people? A question of protest. Not because we don't believe in God. Because we have such strong faith in God and God's goodness, we have to protest this injustice. But when it happens to ourselves, there's no point in protesting. We can only learn and grow. And we have to ask ourselves, why did this happen to me? But more than just why, how can I grow from this? Am I able to experience the depth of relationship with God that is latent, that is inherent in this painful experience? There's one thing to know it. I'm aware that this pain is a cloak, is a way of God giving more than regular, expressing himself in ways that isn't compatible with this world. But another thing to actually experience it, to be able to ride that wave and say, well, I'm in the chaos that's going on, I experience this infinite of God. I experience something deeper than ever. I'm submitting to something higher and more transcendent than I've ever had access to. And it's God reaching out to me in ways that are unimaginable. So, just to go full circle, then I would say, when we read the curses, when the Alter Rebbe, Rosh Nerzan, read the curses, his son, he only heard blessings. The way he said it, he understood within them, yes, the Torah is on a literal level is saying, if you don't listen to the mitzvahs, these are what happens to you. The Torah isn't giving blessings. You don't get blessings for ignoring God. But he understood that if it came from God, there's good to it. Like Isaiah understood, if it's going to be such a societal disorder, it's a sign of Mashiach coming, a sign of a future redemption. Right? So when he heard it from his father, who was a man of positivity, of spiritual goodness, he naturally intuited the depth, the God's infinite expression behind these curses. When the stand-in, the fill-in reader read it, he only heard the words in this a simple level, simple meaning. So that's a reflection, and it's something worth really thinking about over and over, meditating on. Each step of this process, right? There's a number of steps into this understanding. First of all, the faith in God. And that's something which is, always has to be worked on. In Hebrew, faith means emunah, which means comes same word as training, imun. Faith takes training. It's not an all or nothing. I have faith in God. I don't believe in God. Belief, you need to work out, day in, day out, going through again the thought processes, your understanding of things, your faith. It needs constant work and effort. Then you have the understanding of what is the deepest experience I am looking for in life. What's the ultimate experience? Is it happiness? Is it fulfillment? Or is it a closeness with God? Is it something which is transcendent, more than my personal fulfillment, something higher than that? And the third step is then recognizing that everything is an expression of God. And the less we understand of it, chances are, the more it's expressing God, which is why we understand less of it. And so experiences which fit into our understanding of life, fit into our comfort, are God tailoring His expression, His goodness, to our needs. Experiences that we don't understand, that disrupt our lives, that's God less tailoring, more open expression of God. And the fourth step is to open ourselves up to that. Yeah.
There was an article in the Times. There was a woman who has a gene or a mutation that she can't feel pain. She doesn't experience anxiety. You read it, right?
So, yeah.
I've never heard of it. So, long and short of it is that it was her hip, I think, degenerated so much, or maybe it was the knee. It started a while ago because she didn't feel pain. She doesn't, and that's saying emotional pain and physical pain. That there was never a reason to ever get it checked out. So it had degenerated or gotten so bad that all of a sudden one day she couldn't walk. Whereas I mean, this is dealing with pain. It's,
Right.
and maybe in the emotional world, we're getting closer to what we're
But
talking
on a micro
about.
level, pain is a positive experience.
In other words, yeah, that it's sort of could guide you in certain ways to seek help. So in the world with evil or lack of light, like the Rebbe used to say, it's sort of guidance. Like what I was going to say before is you could feel the pain and what you go through, but you don't have to be miserable. Like you could feel the pain, whatever it is, and you're like it's going on. But you don't have to be miserable because in a greater context, there can be some meaning. Maybe not right away, but in the wake of it, could be years later. It's sort of like Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. When I read that book, it blew my mind. And he describes being in the concentration camp. And he said, when you see someone giving someone bread in that situation, now it's one thing in your life to just do it where everybody's compensated for on a, basic essentials are taken care of. But he said, when you witness that there, so that's the meaning. It all of a sudden takes on exponential meaning. And in that darkness, and that was the good, that would be a little good in the shadow of our lives now. But in that world, that was
Incredible.
This is the lottery. This is it.
If we don't